This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our Daily Dose podcast, covering all about day-to-day global affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Hello and good evening to everyone who is joining us from Sydney and around the world. Welcome to today's Monday's Daily Dose podcast, in which we touch base upon this theme of UN Sustainable Development Goals and inspirational global leaders. And in today's Monday's Daily Dose, we are talking about a very critical topic, which not only affects one country, two countries, or three countries, but it affects the entire world. And that is the topic of climate change and understanding how well we are prepared to deliver on the climate commitments and how well we are prepared to tackle the climate change around the world. And this has been a major concern for most of the countries, with extreme weather conditions now getting prominent across various countries, including Australia's bushfires, California's bushfires, and a lot of other events with, the deadly heat waves and drought and record hurricanes happening around the world. And this is the question that we need to ask, that what's the right time to act for the climate commitments that we are making for our countries. So to join this discussion with me today, we have got George Mavros. Welcome again to today's Daily Dose, George, and would love to know your initial comments on today's topic.
Good evening, and great to be with you again, Saurabh. Climate change is one of those things that I often scratch my head about. And I think the reason I do that is because it's one of the things in life where I hear a lot of people tell me the problem, and I hear a lot of people tell me what the potential solution is, but it seems that there is a lack of a strategy, and as you know, I'm all about the strategy. There seems to be a lack of strategy of how we get from here to there without creating chaos in the middle. And I think it's because a lot of people feel that same way, that it has trouble getting traction. What I'm talking about is we hear all of this, that we've got to go electric, we've got to go renewable, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And I'm not disagreeing with that. In principle, I'm not disagreeing with that. But I don't hear a lot of things being said about what happens to all the infrastructure, to all the employment, to all the people that are involved in all the things we want to ban. If we're going to get rid of coal as an energy source, there is a heck of a lot of money in Australia that is not going to be generated, be it for corporate or be it for all those people that are some could be third, fourth generation coal miners. What happens to them? All right. The other side of it is, I keep wondering, and I think many other people do the same thing, Saurabh, where does this all fit in for all the stories, for all the hype? I'm looking at a document here, the world's top emitters of carbon dioxide, megatons of CO2 per year. China, 11,256. The US, 5,275. Down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11. The 12th one on the list is Indonesia at 558. So just for the benefit of everybody, 11,256 at the top. Number 12 is 558. That's Indonesia. Australia isn't even on that chart, so we've got to be well under that. So belting the living daylights out of us, what is that doing? Because if we got rid of every single bit of Indonesia's CO2, there's 558. China is at 11,256. So there's all this what's happening, I think, is there's a lot of people saying, what are you doing about China? What are you doing about the US? What are you doing about the EU? And you're worried about people that are down at 500. Now, I'm not saying nobody, if you're not up the top, you shouldn't be doing something. We should all be doing something. But my understanding from a lot of what I've heard is that there's a lot of leniencies given to the China economy and all of that sort of thing, because we're first world, etc., etc. If we had a 50% improvement in Indonesia, that's roughly 278 megatons a year. If we had a 10% improvement in China, that's 1,125 tons in a year. Should we be looking for a 50% reduction in Indonesia and Canada and Saudi Arabia? Because that still wouldn't come up to a 10% reduction in China.
Probably, I think, George, it's not about looking at those individual numbers separately, rather than looking at the combined numbers and the combined efforts that the countries can do together. Because if you look at the numbers coming from around the world, you look at California's bushfires, which happened last year and which were able to burn 4 million acres of land. Similarly, we are talking from New South Wales, which was in no different conditions exactly 2 years back. And again, in this year, we have already got a warning of more bushfires coming in summer. So we have to be prepared for those bushfires. We have to be prepared for those extreme events happening around the world. But in order to take a collective action around the world, countries need to be together. Countries need to show solidarity and not put a blame on each other.
I'm not putting blame on other countries. What I'm saying is, part of our strategy, if we're not attacking where the biggest problem is, and we're not collectively working on the biggest problem, right? If, roughly speaking, a 10% reduction in China would be the same as wiping out 100% of Canada and 100% of Indonesia's impact. So sometimes you're better off looking at ways and strategies to improve 10, 15, 20% on a big number rather than 100% on a smaller number. That's the point I'm making, Sarab. And I think a lot of people, this is an area that's very hard for people to get their head around. I would like to consider that I'm a reasonably intelligent person. And it befuddles me because I get somebody over here who looks like a quite intelligent, sane person, telling me all the stories about what doom and gloom is coming our way. And then I get somebody over here who's also quite an intelligent person and's got great credibility, saying, no, that's not true. So the average person, unless you're into this sort of stuff, you're getting confused because you're not getting information from one source and information from another source that seems to have the same approach. Now, one of the things that I do note, for all the people that want to tell me that it's all nonsense and it just doesn't exist and people are getting carried away, etc. We've had 20 of the warmest years on record out of the last 22 years. Now, I know there's some people on radio and TV. I've listened to Alan Jones at different times, and he says that this is all just systematic or climatic, and it goes around in systems and all of that. Well, that could be true. That could be true. So if I believe somebody like Alan Jones in Australia, and it's all just a part of the way the world goes, none of us should worry if the next ice age comes along and wipes us all out. We just say, oh, it's just part of evolution. Well, I'm worried because that means it could wipe out my children or my grandchildren. So whatever your beliefs are, it's hard to ignore 20 out of the last 22 years have been the hottest years on record. So whether I understand it or not, I understand that statistic.
And I think it's not about the evolution part, George. So anything you look at the human body, or you look at any machinery, as and how it gets older, there might be some activities happening inside your body which will keep on making you older. And similarly, as and how we move forward with our planet Earth and it gets older and older, there will be some activities happening with evolution. The point is not that. The point is the speed at which the climate change is happening is tremendous. And that's what something the governments and the people have to look at. Now, if you look at the OECD report, which I was looking at recently in 2021, they released a report which said that 70% of the 405 extreme weather events and trends which were going around the world were found to be through the human caused climate change activities. And it suggested that the governments need to, in fact, work on the 5 policy levers. One of it was to invest heavily towards greener technologies. Another one was to regulate the carbon emissions around the countries. Another one was to invest or to charge tax and subsidies for carbon emissions, and thus inviting more people to use greener technologies. And probably, going against the notion presented by a lot of political leaders that it will take away a lot of job opportunities. Instead of looking at from that lens, we should try to create more job opportunities in the greener technology sector and slowly and steadily replace it in the next 10 to 15 years. That's what the Paris Agreement also looks at. And number 4 step it talked about was to lead by example. The global leaders have to lead by examples, be it G7, be it BRICS, all the countries have to come together. And finally, we talked about a key parameter on informing and educating people. Now, that information and education can be done through schools, can be done through town hall meetings, through your companies, and those key partnerships between different entities within the countries and also between different countries, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, as much as at the beginning I was talking about, should we be attacking a particular size country and emissions and all of that, I'm always of the belief that united we stand. So we all have to come together and work on this. I think in just recent times, Ireland. So for a lot of listeners, Ireland has still many homes that use coal for their heating for the homes. So if they have the open fire or the combustion stoves, and that fuel that they burn is coal, and there's varying levels of coal, and one of those levels is called smoky coal. So that, as the name would suggest, it's not as efficient burner as pure coal. Ireland, I think, came out in the last month or so and have already said from, I think it's 23 or somewhere around there, 2023, they will ban the use of smoky coal. So this is in the overall scheme of things, is that going to do a heck of a lot? Don't know. But if 100 people did 1%, we get to 100%. So if 1,000 people do 0.5%, we've gotten 50%. So it's a matter of, you can't just say, oh well, my contribution doesn't matter, so let's not do anything. But I think one of the issues is for everybody to get themselves informed so that you don't become complacent. For me, the reason I took more interest in climate matters in the last few years is because I'd felt it was such a big issue that was confusing, and there was so much conflict, I'd sort of gone, you know what, what will be, and I'll let the powers that be sort it out, etc. But then when I couldn't rely on either party or either side to give me information to see what I can do, I then decided that I needed to stop being complacent and being more proactive. And one of my favourite things that I keep reminding people is you get some incredible words out of songs. And John Farnham has a fantastic song called "You're the Voice." And there's a line in that says, "You're the voice, try and understand it." And what I take from that is each and every one of us is part of this. Each and every one of us is part of the voice. If globally the people that are ruled by governments came together, then globally all of those same people would not complain about the governments ruling them, because we'd have in place a much better government system. You are the voice. And in this, each and every one of us has to contribute. Each and every one of us has to consider it.
Yep. And I think it will require those collaborations between the businesses, the bureaucracy, and the people all coming together. Because then what's the right time? That's what we have been asking for the last 10 years. Every year we see these kind of actions coming forward, these kind of bigger milestones being set by the countries, but it is all on paper. We don't see it getting implemented for any real steps against climate change. We saw about this girl from Sweden. We all know about her, Greta Thunberg, who came out in 2018 quite vocally, a 16-year-old girl who left her school, and she started with this Fridays for Future movement, in which she invited all the school children in Sweden to come out and protest against the government and spend one day by skipping your school and working towards climate change. And it faced a lot of criticism. People said that she wants to become something, she has some political motives. But again, if you look at, even if she has some political motives, what's wrong in what she is saying? I don't find anything wrong in that. What she is actually stating is related to the climate change activities happening around the world. And she was becoming the voice of the young leaders of the future, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily agree with everything that she says or everything that or the way she goes about things. And I certainly personally believe that she has been orchestrated by some people for their benefit. But at the end of the day, what's she actually talking about? What is she being political about? What is she being manipulated about, if I believe all of those things are true? A better living condition for my children, my grandchildren, and my great-great-great-grandchildren, who I will never see, but wouldn't it be nice if I leave the world in a better place for them? A better opportunity for this world to survive. I mean, anybody that says that that's terrible, that she's being political. Well, I tell you what, she's being political to actually improve the world, not ruin it. So what's the problem? What is the problem? Should we only be political in things that suit the government of the time? I don't think so. That doesn't work so well for the average person. And if she did nothing else, within 1 or 2 months, she had the entire world talking about something, and seriously talking about something that they've been waffling on for how many years. And I'm not just talking about the politicians. I'm talking about every man, woman and child in the street that heard about it. Suddenly we were talking about whether you agreed or disagreed. Now that's got to do something of benefit. If you can get 100 of my friends that probably hadn't spoken terribly much about it prior to her, suddenly talking about it after her, that creates debate, and from debate creates future thought. So yeah, hats off to her. Hats off to her. I think she's a remarkable young lady. I don't have to agree or disagree with her stance. I don't have to agree or disagree with her viewpoint to acknowledge she's a remarkable young lady that has a belief and wasn't afraid to put herself out there.
Absolutely. And also, we were just talking about this fact, George, that it's not about the blame game that is happening between the countries. I was reading this article from BBC World, which stated about this fact that in the last few weeks, there have been some protests in UK against the government there, that they have not been taking much action against climate change. And as we see the typical debate happening between the Conservatives and the Labour, both in Australia, UK, and countries like these. Now, the question here is that report was trying to put a blame game again on different countries, the countries obviously which are more populated. And if you also look at the report, it states you that, in fact, China is still at the top, as you were just stating that. The report suggests that 2,777 million tons of carbon per year being emitted by China. I'm talking about carbon levels per year emitted by China. Similarly, for the UK, for the US, it was 1,442 million tons of carbon per year. Now, if you look at the numbers, it is still high for the United States and it is still high for China. It's not about the blame game here. It's more about, coming together on this point and understanding what's right and what's wrong. But I also want to look at not only from the government's point of view, George, but also from a common man's point of view who might be listening to us today. And they might be thinking, what can we do as a common man on a day-to-day basis so that we can contribute towards stopping the rapidly changing climate? So, those actions can be very small baby steps. For example, encouraging a single-use plastic at your house, switching towards greener technologies. And as a common people, you can also have those protests and online protests. I am not in favor of the violent protests that you go out on the roads and do that, but online protests and having those signatories, to sending out those signatures to the government so that they feel pressurized about taking a strong action towards climate change, because all the politicians just understand the language of votes. Unless and until they don't see their votes in danger, they will not start taking action.
Yeah. We've also, we've got all sorts of things that are going on and impacting on future lives. I've been following for about 4 or 5 years now, what's known as waste to energy technology, and I'm particularly interested in that because what that actually does is two things. It removes waste from landfill and the oceans and things like that, and by using it to generate heat and power and electricity, it then reduces the need for us to be involved with coal and oil and all that side of things. So, but the counter argument to that is people that are saying it emits toxic fumes and this is damaging, etc., etc. The people that are promoting waste to energy talk about the temperatures that are generated in that actually remove the toxicity, and it's burnt out. So yet again, the poor old average person in the street or home, we get two lots of information, and so when in doubt, we do nout. So what happens is you confuse people, and there's my father said to me many years ago, if all the different churches who profess to be Christian stopped fighting one another, then maybe we'd have more people following Christianity. Now, whether you believe in religion or not, I'm not getting into that. But his point was, you have so many people that are saying they want to get to this better point, and they argue between themselves as to what to do, instead of what he was saying is, if you came together for the bigger cause, then let's talk about that. Climate change is another one of those things. Everybody wants to, we don't need waste to energy. We need solar energy. We don't need solar energy. We need wind energy. We don't need wind energy. We need this. We need that. It seems to me that the best thing that could happen is that we all agree what we've got ain't working. Based on the figures, what we've got is not working. So what do we do to improve on? Not for ourselves, maybe not even for the next generation, but for the ones after that. And that's where I see every person starting to think about it. Get educated. Don't be afraid to take alternative arguments, because that's how I listen to people on both sides of the spectrum so that I can then make a decision. I've got friends that won't listen to the news because it's all false. I listen to the news because I trust myself to be able to disseminate between good and bad. And I listen to the pros and I listen to the cons, and we all need to be doing that. Everybody that watches this podcast should be thinking about it and making a decision. But let's be united in one thing. Where we are is not working. So
Absolutely.
if you want to improve, you have to change something. Because doing the same thing, you're not going to get anything different to what you're already getting.
Absolutely.
And even our Australian government, Sarab, and I happen to be a Liberal voter. I mean, to me, what a con job our Prime Minister and a few others tried to do. Oh, we're meeting climate change. We're just taking a credit from here and we do this and we... they should be magicians. The sleight of hand that they tried to pull off, they're just like poor magicians. Even if I accept what they say is true and they can use that as part of it, why not try and improve on it yet again? Why not try and do better yet again? As opposed to, okay, well, that's it. We came up with a story. We've done our 10%.
I think it's also time, George, to begin the reverse phenomena. So I was just thinking about that whenever politicians or bureaucratic leaders make any decision, the first thing probably they look at is that decision going to fetch us more votes in the next election? Is that decision going to affect us being in power in the next 5 years? So why not we as the voters, we as the consumers and producers, start thinking in the reverse direction and stating that what can we do to put these politicians under pressure so that they start taking action against climate change? The moment we start putting pressure on them, we will start looking at it from their lens. That's what we do in marketing. We start thinking from the consumer's lens what they are thinking. We start thinking from their lens what they want, what they are thinking. And I think it's about those collective measures which will require regulation, energy related taxes, government incentives for greener technology, as I was just talking about, and those public and private investments so that we can set up low carbon resilient structures.
Yeah. There's an Australian politician by the name of Don Chipp. Probably, I'd say about 15, 20 years ago, something like that, maybe even longer. And he started up a new political party. He was in the Liberal Party, and then he started up another party, which sadly, since his demise, that party has disappeared. But he was asked once, what do you do to get better decisions and more trust out of our politician? And John Chipp's theory was, if every politician knew that at the end of their term, they weren't going to get a job, no matter from their decisions, They weren't going to be wealthy from their decisions. They weren't going to be able to do more than just 2 terms and then that was it. They dropped off. Then they would start to do something. But he said what happens is, and we've seen it time and time again, politicians, yes, they do something for our country, whichever country we're in. Yes, they make some efforts, whichever country we're in. But it's amazing how when they leave, so many of them end up being very wealthy, end up being on the boards of various companies, and they have positions of power in their private life. And one has to wonder, what is motivating you as a politician for the past 10 years? Was it to leave the country in a better position or to place yourself in a better job? Sadly, I'm cynical enough to think that the country came second. And that's why I say we need the people to be thinking more and we need the people to be involved more, because that will force the politicians to act on. At the end of the day, politicians are supposedly there to act on our behalf. Now we can talk about communism and we can talk about various regimes, dictators, and all of that. But in general, in our democratic societies, they're supposed to be elected by us to govern for us. So if we're not happy with what's happening, we have to look at us. We have to look at us.
Absolutely. And I think it's all begins with the people movement, any
Yes.
transformation that we have to bring forward, any change that we need to bring in the society starts from the people's movements. Well, that's it for today's Daily Dose podcast. We hope to see you again, in this podcast series for our Daily Dose episodes. And if you want to also listen us on Apple iTunes or Spotify, you can just type Ultimate Global Podcast on your Apple iTunes or go to your Spotify and type the same. You'll be able to find us there as well. So if you don't have time to listen to the video version, just tune into the podcast series over the audio version while going to the office or while traveling around the city. And we would like to have any kind of feedback coming from you. If you have any suggestions on different topics that we should touch base upon, that we have not touched till now, feel free to send it to our page on Facebook, and we will be taking those topics in the coming days, because this is ultimately your podcast and we want to discuss something which is relevant to you. Thank you so much, George, for attending today's podcast.
Thanks, Arab. Thanks, everybody. Hope we've been giving you some ideas for you to think about, not only today, but on our other podcasts and the ones that we do in the future. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.